and welcome to day 3 of our virtual youth retreat. Today we're going to be talking about fear and uncertainty, questioning authority, and general pandemic anxiety. We have 2 speakers today. Our first speaker is going to be the Reverend Kim Jackson. She is the interim vicar at Church of the Common Ground. She served as rector at Absalom Jones. She's a social justice warrior and is running for Georgia Senate in District 41. Our second speaker is going to be Leslie Ann Drake, our deacon at St. Patrick's right now, who works with Path to Shine, which is a nonprofit organization that works with children. So today's word is mitzvah. Mitzvah means a deep emotional bond between people, especially those separated by distance or death. And the songs that we're going to be singing are Oceans, otherwise known as Where My Feet May Fail, Come Thou Font, and Sanctuary. So I'll see you guys in just a few seconds.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount, oh, fix me on it, mount of God's unchanging love. Here I find my greatest treasure, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, here to rescue me from danger, interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount, oh, fix me on it, mount of thy unchanging love. Praise the mount, oh, fix me on it, mount of thy unchanging love.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh my gosh, no, thank you. Like, I was a little nervous, honestly, because I just think you're so cool.
Don't be nervous.
Oh, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
I was saying it's all good. We're just regular people here.
Okay, so if you don't mind starting us off with just a little introduction on who you are, what you do, and please brag on yourself a little bit here. I would really don't hold back.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. I'm Pastor Reverend Kim Jackson. I'm an ordained Episcopal priest, and I have the great privilege and honor of serving at the Church of the Common Ground, which I think many folks have been to or know about, but it's a congregation that meets outside, and most of our members are people who sleep on the streets every night. They're people who are experiencing homelessness, and so that's the ministry that I've been called to and that I get to do. I've been ordained for almost 10 years, which is astounding. And yes, I did do it when I was quite young. So I got ordained right after finishing grad school. So I've kind of run this race quite quickly, but am grateful for this calling and to be able to do this work.
That is amazing. Church of the Common Ground is so cool. I love it so much. So can you speak on a little bit how the pandemic has really affected like the communities of the people that you work with?
Yeah, so this pandemic has been hard. I think it's been hard for everyone, but particularly for my congregants. So we've had to stop having worship, and because people who live outside often don't have access to technology, we can't even do like a Zoom or a Facebook Live with them. And so that's been really hard. But we have been able to continue to serve lunch. So we serve lunch on Sundays at 1 o'clock in the same exact place. And we do a lot of pastoral care then. So we still get to talk to people and engage with them and even pray with people one-on-one. And that's been a real gift. But, you know, our friends who live on the streets, I think have really struggled to understand what's happening. And they don't have access to news in the same way. But also they've had hard time just figuring out like places to go to the bathroom now because things are shut down, right? Where do they charge their cell phones? Like the library, this isn't true anymore, but you know, for most of the pandemic, the library was closed, and kind of their go-to places for getting the resources that they need were shut down. And so that was really difficult. And people were really, really hungry at the beginning. So the way that things kind of work in Atlanta is that for the most part, if you're experiencing homelessness before COVID, like you could always get food because there's kind of always somebody out there that was passing out food. But when we started sheltering in place, people of goodwill were staying home and not providing food. And so there was probably about a month in there in which things were really quite critical. And we actually stepped up the amount of food that we were providing to in order to help offset the cost, that help offset the fact that there weren't others around.
Thank you so much for all that you do with that. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you. It's, you know, that this is holy work, and it's also work that I can't do without the support of the Diocese of Atlanta. That's how we do it. All of the meals that we provide to our friends on the street all come from different churches across the diocese. And so it's not work that I do, it's work that we do, and we do it together.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Next question would be our themes for the day. This is kind of similar to the last question on how kind of the people that you interact with are doing, but our themes are fear and uncertainty, and also questioning authority, which I think are big right now. So if you don't mind speaking a little bit to what you've seen in your communities with those kind of themes.
Yeah, so people are afraid. I think we're all afraid in some ways, afraid of getting sick or afraid of getting someone else sick, and we not knowing that, you know, we're carrying the disease. And so there's been a lot of fear, a lot of concern about will they be able to, on the streets in particular, like there are people who are just not around anymore, and we think that some of them have been able to go stay with family, or we don't know. And so there's fear about like, will we see our friends again? Are they okay? But at the same time, people are afraid, and that's a very natural feeling. There's also like an incredible amount of hope that I'm seeing in my community too, like in resilience. Like people have kind of figured out how to make things work. They've socially distanced themselves and are getting the masks that they need for themselves. And so yes, people are afraid. Yes, people are concerned. And certainly I have my own fears. You know, every Sunday that I go down and I'm, you know, around 80, 90 people, most of whom don't have masks on because they're eating, right? There's some trepidation with that. And yet I continue to do the work because God has called us to do this work. And so I think that that's one of the things I want to highlight about fear, is that just because we are afraid doesn't mean we don't do something. So we can talk about this maybe a little bit later in the interview, but I just ran for office, and it's literally the scariest thing I've done. I think, like, other than my fear of heights, it is one of the scariest things that I've done, to run for office, to like put myself out there and like let people write all about me on social media and say all kinds of things. And I had to like remind myself that just because it's scary doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that I can't do it. And it doesn't mean that that fear should stop me. And so I want to encourage people, when you're afraid, hear that fear, but know that it's not inherent, doesn't inherently mean that things are bad. And then, this piece around questioning authority, I'm not sure, like, Julia, do you want me to support respecting authority, or do you want me to encourage?
We are encouraging questioning authority here.
All right. I just want to know where we are. So here's what I know. I have spent the last, 15 years of my life in going to protests, leading protests, being at rallies, and demanding change of our authorities. And I do that because I know that God calls us to fight on behalf of other people, right? And to fight particularly on behalf of those who have been marginalized. If we look at the scriptures, we're talking about the people when Jesus says, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. Like, we have a responsibility to be a voice and to speak and fight on behalf of those who are hungry, for those who are in prison. And so I've been doing that work for the last 15 years. And yes, it is about resisting authorities and questioning authority. And so I think we have to do that with care and concern, right? Like, I don't disobey all laws, right? I follow traffic laws because that's what's safe for us. But when I see something that is not fair, that's not helpful, even though the authorities have said, like, well, this is the law and this is how we act, I think there is a time. And I just finished watching the funeral for John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, and I just think so much about how he was a person who questioned authority. He questioned Jim Crow laws. He questioned segregation laws, and he really pushed us to move forward. And I hope that we all can live in that legacy of looking and seeing and saying, oh, maybe this world can be different. So much about this is about imagining something more than just what your authorities have told you. And certainly that's how I've tried to live my life. And it's kind of hard sometimes. I think that I don't know, I hope the bishop never sees this, because I think that I make his life a little more difficult, because I do ask questions.
Good trouble.
It's good trouble. Yeah. But it is trouble, and that comes with consequences. So yeah.
Well, I don't think the bishop is going to tune into our youth camp, so that's that's probably pretty good. But that gives a really good segue into, I kind of wanted to ask what inspired you to want to run for office and be like a part of that good trouble and that change.
Yeah, so I was inspired to run for office around the same time, I think, in my youth and adolescence, that I felt called to ministry. So I was 13 years old when I went to a city council meeting in my hometown. So I'm from like a little small town, like think Rome, Georgia, but smaller. Okay. And I went to a city council meeting with my class, and I saw them talking and making decisions. And one of the decisions was about like getting roads paved in our town. And, this is the South, and where I rode on the school bus and the dirt roads, this is really significant to get your road paved. And I just had that light bulb moment of being like, oh, elected office is where change gets made. And at 13, I didn't know the when or the where or even the how, but I knew that the what I wanted to do with my life was to make real positive change in the world. And for me, that has been expressed through, yes, running for office, but also through my calling as a priest. I felt called to the priesthood actually when I was even younger than that, when I was 8. But these things kind of dovetail together. And as I was going through a process of discernment with the diocese about becoming a priest, I said to them outright, I feel called to be the kind of priest who stands on the streets at protests and who goes and visits people who are in prison and who questions authority, and who actually demands that we create a world that's better than the one we have right now. And so those two things, like running for office, being a state senator, and being a clergy, they really do they're cut from the same cloth, if you will, of just feeling so clear that I want to help create a new world, a world where God's love is felt and seen all around us. So.
Oh my gosh, I get chills like hearing you talk about that, to like be inspired by somebody in office. Thank you for what you're doing. So as someone who's like running for Senate, and obviously I feel like you are great at, you understand kind of the questions that this generation is having and things like that. And so as someone who is running for Senate, what do you think the missing link is with other government officials, that makes people feel like they can't trust their government?
Yeah, so that's a hard question. I'm only going to focus on the local level because I don't want to get caught up in national politics. I think that's harder. So I actually was just having this conversation with a friend, in that I think that local leaders, we are tasked with making laws and policies that impact everybody who's around us. So whether that's your city council person, your county council person, or state rep, they're all tasked with trying to make laws to make your lives better, our lives better, right? But we can only do that when we know what's needed. And so if people don't talk to their state legislators, if they don't talk to their city councilmen and their city council people, then it's hard for us to know all the things that need to be changed, right? That need to be made better. And so sometimes I think the disconnect is that, young people, you guys are like, you're out there in the world and you see problems, and maybe you talk about them on social media, but I don't follow you on social media. So I don't, like there's just some communications pieces. And so I do want to encourage like young people, reach out, like send an email, follow people on Twitter. Like you can Google who is my city council person, or who's my county council, who's my state rep, who's my state senator. And you can follow us on Twitter, like you can, and engage, right? I don't know how many people realize, but the reason why medical marijuana, the oil that is legal in Georgia, so not marijuana is not legal. It is not legal. But there is the oil that is illegal. And the reason why it was made legal was because a constituent, a person like you, like a regular person, went to their lawmaker and they said, my child has seizures and this oil helps with those seizures. Can you make it legal for us? And that's what started the train. And now we have legalized oil for treating these types of diseases, right? And so the same thing, I don't know like what problems people are seeing in the world, because but those same things, right? Like we want teenagers, we need young people to name their problems and to tell authorities about them, and to not think that like we're just these special people who you can't access, because we're not. We're like totally here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to follow you on Twitter as soon as we get done with this conversation.
Awesome.
But my last question, which is also kind of a doozy, but if you have any advice to give to like young people in this generation who are coming of age in this time where there's a lot of things that seem to be popping up every day that are more and more questionable or problematic, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So I think I want to start by encouraging you all to listen to each other's stories and to expand your peer group. So if your peer group looks just like you do, then I want you to expand that and reach out and meet people who look differently than you do. If your entire peer group they're all Episcopalians, they're all Christians, then I'm going to encourage you to expand that peer group so that you have friends who are Muslim or Baha'i or of no faith. Because I think that when we bridge those gaps, that's when we can actually create some movement. Right now we are living in a season and a time where people are yelling from the rooftops and writing on the streets, Black Lives Matter. And that has always been true. Black lives have always mattered, and our lives in this country have always been really complex and difficult. But oftentimes white people didn't know that because you didn't have relationships with us. You weren't friends with us. You didn't get to hear our stories of the times when our teachers looked at us and said, we're gonna put you on suspension because we don't trust you. And that wasn't happening to our white peers, right? So um, I want to just encourage you all to develop relationships and friendships so that you can hear those stories, so that you can understand a little bit better about why these movements are necessary, right? And I just want to encourage you all to like ride the wave of passion that is out there, hop on it, and it's really life-giving. Like I remember, I was like 17, the first rally that I ever went to in my entire life. I was like 17 years old in Greenville, South Carolina. And it's like amazing. It's overwhelming, it's powerful, it's incredible to be with a group of people who are all like striving to try to make change. And like there are a lot of those opportunities out there right now, or create your own opportunities to ride that wave of passion to really fight. And then I think the last word of advice that I would say is that in seasons of fear, when you are overwhelmed, when there's like so much happening in the world that you don't know where you fit in or how it's going to work, I want you all to remember that you have a God who is with you in the storm, and that God actually does amazing and wonderful things in the midst of storms. And so never feel alone, even in the chaos. Know that God is with you to strengthen you, and that good things can come out of that storm because God is there and the Spirit is moving. And also know that not only is God there, but when you reach out, there'll be some others who can help you too. So make sure you reach out to your priest, your youth leader. I don't know, follow me on Twitter and tweet me. But know that we are all here in the midst of the storm with you. And especially in those most lonely hours, know that God is in the midst of the storm, creating all kinds of beautiful things in the midst of chaos.
So well said. Thank you so much for letting us interview you today.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is really great, and I look forward to having some further conversation. And I'll be live to answer any questions. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and glad you all are talking about these issues of fear and talking about resisting authority, because I think it's really, really important, particularly in this time.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Ann, and I'm a deacon in the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Atlanta. I was originally assigned to St. Benedict's Church in Smyrna, and then I was reassigned to St. Aidan's, which is where I met Liz and Ethan. And then I was reassigned to St. Patrick's, where I met Liz again, and Ethan again, and now Julia. And Julia had asked me to talk to you this morning about the death penalty. So a little bit of background for me. I founded and run a nonprofit called Path to Shine that works with elementary school children who live in poverty. And we work in 17 locations around the state of Georgia. And that's connected to the death penalty because the death penalty disproportionately impacts children who grow up in poverty and become adults living in poverty, and children who become adults who are people of color. God has a sense of humor, and God invites us to places and to work that we might not envision for ourselves. And so here I am as a Brit talking about the American death penalty. Somewhat ironic, I think. So some statistics. As of June the 11th of this year, Capital punishment is legal in 28 states in the United States, including Georgia. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, 22 people were executed last year, and the number of death sentences that were imposed was 34. According to the Criminal Justice Project of the NAACP, there are 2,620 people on death row in the United States as of January the 1st of this year, and of those, 53 are women. Since 1976, when the death penalty was reinstated in this country, 1,513 people have been executed, and 16 of those were women. Since 1973, there have been 170 death row exonerations. That means people who were given the death penalty and who are locked up and who are later proved to be innocent. According to Amnesty International, in 2019, there were 657 reported executions worldwide. The countries with the highest totals of reported totals in order were Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Egypt, United States of America, Pakistan, and Somalia. It's acknowledged there are thousands more people who are executed, and those murders are not reported in places like China and North Korea and Vietnam and Syria. But have you noticed how much the United States is an outlier here? The rest of Western civilization abandoned the death penalty decades ago, some centuries ago. And I wonder, why does it still persist here? Let me share a couple of stories with you. Some of you are old enough to perhaps remember the name of Kelly Gisindana. She was the first woman in the US to be executed, and she was executed, the first woman to be executed in Georgia since 1945, and the only woman in the US to be executed in 2015. In 1997, she worked with a man by the name of Gregory Owen to murder her husband. Kelly wanted her husband killed so that she could get the house that they jointly owned, and so she could get insurance money when her husband died. Mr. Owen was the person who actually committed the murder and killed Kelly's husband. But he, Mr. Owen, struck a deal with the authorities, and he was given a sentence of life in prison. Kelly did not strike a deal, and Kelly did not actually kill her husband, so she thought she would not be executed, but she was. If you look her up, Kelly Gisindana, online, you'll see that she found a deep Christian faith in prison. She took a theology class through Emory University. She wrote a paper and sent it to the renowned German theologian Jürgen Moltmann. He replied, and they began writing to each other, a pen pal relationship that carried on for many years. He is one of the people who appealed to the authorities here in Georgia to grant her clemency. Kelly ministered to many other women in prison, and some women reported that she was the one who gave them the courage to keep living and even saved some from committing suicide. She became a model prisoner. Her children begged the state not to kill her, but the state killed her anyway. I also want to tell you about Kerry. This excerpt is from a sermon that I preached a few years ago after I had attended a death penalty protest and vigil for Kerry. I'm sad to say that I've been to the place where the death penalty is carried out several times, and I've been there several times because there have been several executions by the state of Georgia in the last few years, but happily there have not been any this year. Here we go. I pulled off the highway at Jackson and drove into the parking lot at the Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. This is where the state of Georgia executes people. As I pulled into the driveway, the usual big orange barriers. A contingent of heavily armed policemen were standing, talking to each other. When they saw me, 2 of them came over to my car and asked for my ID, which I gave them. I was then told to pull forward and get out of the car. A policeman came over with his dog to check my car for drugs. Another one came over with another dog to check my car for weapons. Once they were done, I was allowed to get back in my car and told where I had to park. I parked the car and then walked over to a roped-off area in the field where 9 other people were gathered. It was moderately cold that evening, but from previous visits, I knew we would be there for many hours and it would get colder, so I had extra layers to add. I was there to keep vigil, to protest yet another execution. I heard some wonderful stories that night about a man named Kerry. He became a Christian several years ago while in prison. He had been baptized while being shackled. That means with his wrists and feet together. For the past 5 years, he had met regularly with a Lutheran pastor, discussing theology and discussing life and forgiveness. Kerry taught himself Spanish while he was inside and had requested a copy of a Spanish Bible so he could study even more. He taught some of his fellow inmates how to read and write. He reconnected with a high school friend a couple of years ago, and they spent time together the day that he was killed by the state. Kerry was loved by his family, and they drove from Illinois to see him a few times each year, every year, for 26 years. He was a third-generation William Sally, so his family called him by his middle name, Kerry, to keep from confusing the Wills. Kerry became more than a criminal that night. Kerry became a human being who had made a terrible mistake. He was a son, a brother, an in-law, a friend. He was loved, just as those who had been executed before him had been loved. There was deep pain all around, pain that had been carried for so many, many years. That night, the state of Georgia cemented its place as the #1 state in the nation for the number of people killed in 2016. The state of Georgia made that distinction last month when it executed the 8th person. Kerry was the 9th. And that's what we do when we go to the vigils at the Diagnostic Center. We share stories about the people or the person who is to be executed that night. Some of you might have read the book Just Mercy. I know it's been assigned as a book by some schools, or perhaps you saw the movie. Brian Stevenson's the author, the lawyer, the main character in the movie, and frankly, he's a hero of mine. He's dedicated his entire life to getting people who are wrongly accused off death row. He's argued cases in front of the Supreme Court so that this country no longer executes children, or adults who committed terrible crimes as children, or people who are mentally challenged. He says, "We are all better than the worst thing we have ever done." I believe that. I think God believes that too. Helen Gisendana was better than the one night she met Mr. Owen and planned her husband's murder. Kerry was better than the night he shot and killed Mr. Moore. And as a supposedly Christian country, I think we're better than the death penalty. So why do we persist with the death penalty? Well, here are a couple of things to ponder. Perhaps the death penalty still exists in this country because of our desire for retaliation. When someone hurts you, your immediate instinct is to hurt them back. It's as natural as the hair on your head. It's ingrained in us as part of our survival. It comes from the least developed part of our brain, the cerebellum, from which we react, the fight or flight response. Perhaps the death penalty exists in this country because we are afraid. If Kerry killed Mr. Moore, he might kill me too. So if we kill Kerry, then he can't kill me. But why do we have to kill Kerry? Couldn't we give him a sentence of life in prison? People say that costs too much money. But because of the number of appeals and the cost of keeping someone locked up on death row, it's actually more expensive to impose the death penalty than to have someone in prison for life. Really, you can look it up. This is the reason some conservative politicians are now in favor of abolishing the death penalty, because it'll save money. Perhaps the death penalty exists because it will make us feel better. It will for sure soothe the pain of the family of the person who was murdered. Well, actually, retribution doesn't bring a pain-free life. It doesn't heal wounds. Forgiveness heals wounds. And forgiveness requires great courage on everyone's part. It takes time and deep listening. Some people know this. Listen to this statement from the mother of a young woman who was murdered. Yes, Daniel Lee, the murderer, damaged my life. But I can't believe taking his life is going to change any of that. I can't see how executing him will honor my daughter in any way. In fact, it sort of dirties her name because she wouldn't want it, and I don't want it. It's not the way it should be. This is why Jesus tells us to forgive without limit. So the death penalty continues in the US. It's a flawed system. We know that because 170 people who were wrongly accused have now been proved innocent. And who knows how many more innocent people have already been murdered in this country by the states. It's a flawed system because it's imposed unfairly on people of color, on people who are poor, and on people who are intellectually challenged. It's a flawed system because the guards who have to carry out the executions are subject to untold stress. From a paper from the Department of Justice, I quote, "The unacknowledged stress experienced by guards on death rows and execution teams risks dangerous mental health consequences for them and for those around them. The simplest solution would be to remove the cause of the problem and abolish the death penalty. The death penalty is too traumatic for everyone." So what can you do? You can follow groups on social media who work for dismantling the death penalty. You can read books to learn more about it. Perhaps your teachers can assign a book on the topic to the class to read and discuss. You can talk to your parents and to your peers. You can talk to your clergy. For those of you who are old enough, you can vote and you can protest, safely and socially distanced, of course. But most of all, I appeal to you as young people of faith to call on your faith. Remember your church, the Episcopal Church, and the Sunday school lessons you have heard since you started going to church. God said, "Thou shalt not kill." Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," even if that person is your enemy, a stranger, a foreigner, someone who looks different from you, someone who is different from you. Jesus calls us to listen and to forgive without limit. This is the way of courage and of faith. This is how we fulfill our baptismal vows. Death penalty is wrong and needs to be abolished in this country. I bid your prayers that it will be abolished and that happens soon. Love will see us through. Love is the way. Remember your faith. Thank you.
So here we are. Hi, I'm Alicia.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm Daniel.
And we're part of the St. Patrick's Parish. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about journaling. Obviously, we like to journal. This is our stack of journals, mostly mine. But this is something that we do as a family. And I thought it'd be a really nice idea to kind of share with you how we use it to stay in touch with ourselves, and how we use it as a form of prayer and staying in touch with God. And I thought I'd open this up with a poem as a form of prayer to give you an alternative for prayer at some time. Sometimes it's hard to just go old school prayer, so I want to give you a poem to read out. Mary Oliver is a fantastic poet. If you're not into her, you can look her up. She has some beautiful poetry. And I'm going to read to you one called, "Where Does the Temple Begin and Where Does It End?" There are things you can't reach, but you can reach out to them, and all day long. The wind, the bird flying away, the idea of God. And it can keep you as busy as anything else and happier. The snake slides away, the fish jumps like a little lily out of the water and back in. The goldfinches sing from the unreachable top of tree. I look morning to night. I am never done with looking. Looking, I mean not just standing around, but standing around as though with your arms wide open and thinking maybe something will come, some shiny coil of wind, or a few leaves from any old tree. They are all in this too. And now I will tell you the truth. Everything in this world comes, at least closer and cordially, like the nibbling tinsel-eyed fish, the unlooping snake, like the goldfinches, the little dolls of gold fluttering around the corner of the sky, of God, the blue air. So here we go. So I have a bunch of journals here, and pouring out words onto paper really helps me do a couple of things. I do it mostly at night before bed, just as someone would for prayer. Sometimes I do it as I'm taking a bath, sometimes I do it in my bed. But I have a collection of journals, and let me tell you, there's way more than what I have sitting here. And as a family, we have a collection of journals. Sometimes those journals are full of words, and sometimes those journals are full of pictures and artwork and drawings. Yeah. Sometimes they're prayers, or sometimes they're like pleas for help, like that gut-wrenching help when things are going really wrong and you want it to be over, or you need to, like really dump it out on paper. But in that moment when I'm writing those words down and I'm putting that out, I'm kind of honoring a little bit of myself, and the part of myself that feels, the part, the heart part of myself versus the head part. And I pour it out on paper. Really, it's really for no one to read. And I go back at it, and sometimes I can't even read it. Like, it's not even legible.
Just to get your thoughts out on paper.
Yes.
It helps release stress and anxiety, and if you have, it's just helpful to get your words out. It feels like you're talking to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're going through difficult times, sometimes it's very helpful. You really need it. But it's really hard to journal when you're not going through difficult times, when everything is going great. Sometimes you forget to write in your journal. And I was looking at one last night. I was talking to Jack a little bit about journaling. And I went back to an old journal of mine, and it started at right before COVID. It was the last time I journaled, ironically. So the last day I wrote in this journal was March 28th on a Sunday. And it's called Not Normal, underlined, and I really, really wrote some good stuff in here. But it's interesting to go back a little bit and take a look at my thoughts and where I've been. And somewhere in this journaling process, I'm pouring my heart out. I'm asking for clarity and balance. And then, I can see the gaps. And sometimes in the journal, it's not just what you wrote, it's those spaces and times where you didn't write and you knew you weren't connected. And I can go back to this, and I can go back to my thoughts. And sometimes I go back to a prayer or a place where I was at from months ago, where I was really pouring something out. And it still seems valid today. I have some, motivational stuff that I had done when I was working, when I went to the desert. I have kind of, and this is a good one. This is called change. Change happens when the discomfort of the familiar outweighs the fear of the unknown. And so, we're going through a difficult time where we feel isolated, and
There's a lot of change happening.
A lot of change happening.
which is scary sometimes.
Yeah.
And one thing that I do on my phone is I went on a pilgrimage with my youth group, and I journaled in an actual journal then, but now I don't know, I don't really keep track with physical things other than like my wallet, my phone, and my AirPods. Actually, the wallet sometimes I just lose. So I have a journal on my phone. You guys can't see it, but I write down things in my phone journal, just like what I'm thinking. And I've used it a lot the past, I don't know, 4 weeks. It's been, I don't know, it's just been good. Even if it's just been good to plan out, my thoughts, and going through them, I can actually see the change in my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to go back through it. There's a little thing that I do, and I've done with the youth group. I teach Right 13 at St. Patrick's. And one of the things we go through during our curriculum is we write down some of the labels that people give to us. So we write them on Post-it notes. So some labels we get are good, right? And some labels we get are bad. But there's a time and a place when you're kind of ready to let it go. And there's a time and a place when you're ready to let like an old journal go. It's time to send it off, send it back, to the heavens. You're done. That journal served its purpose. Those words were written, but they are, they no longer, you no longer need to keep the paper. You're ready to let it go. And we have a huge fire pit, which you can't see behind us back in the backyard. It's fabulous. Liz can tell you all about it.
You burn stuff in it.
We burn stuff in it. Journals is one of them. So
Yeah.
here's an old journal here that I had during a really difficult time in my life. I have little snips of art and stuff in here. Daniel, that's your journal when you were a little boy.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to let this one go. I
Bite
can
the
see.
dust.
I think it's time to burn it up. And
Nice.
yeah, it's just kind of, bring it back to ashes and let that part of my life and those things that I had go. And this is the one I'm currently working on. This is an old one. I also have, here's my journal for work. This is a little less prayerful. This is a little bit more task oriented, but
It's good for organization. And when I can't burn my phone, but I can just delete the things. It's the same idea.
Yeah, there's really, you don't want to get to the place where you're like hoarding journals.
Yeah, you need to let go of, old stuff.
You need to let go of
Unless
stuff.
it's really, really, really meaningful, you should probably just let go.
Yeah, so here's some journals. Here's another. This one hasn't been used. So anytime we go to the store and we find paper, sometimes we like them unlined. This is an unlined journal where you can do a
can draw in
drawing
it.
and then make a statement or a prayer. Sometimes the drawing is everything. This is a dream journal right here, and it has dot paper in it, because sometimes when you have this really amazing dream in the middle of the night and you forget your dreams, right? If you don't really think about them or write them down.
You actually forget 91% of your dreams, and if you remember them, they must have been pretty special.
Yeah.
So it's good to write them down.
Yeah, so if you wake up in the middle of the night, you have a dream that either triggers you or invokes some emotion that you recognize as being pretty important or speaks to your soul and the essence of who you are, write it down or draw a picture about it, and you can go back to it later and it'll take you right back to that place. This journal has dot paper on it, and this is really a dream journal. And then we have this is one of Sophie's old journals. I believe this has mostly artwork in it. No, it's just got a few words and stuff.
It's a lot of drawings.
Yeah, mostly drawings. Sometimes it's not words, it's imagery. But we really, and then here's a big journal. I have big plans for this one. This one's called Possibilities. I love this journal. It's got a little tear in it, but I found it on sale. It's got big white empty paper, so I can do whatever I want with it. I can just write one word. I can do a drawing. I can scribble stuff on it. And so this is kind of what I have going on. Daniel, you have a journal too. I just bought Daniel this really cool journal.
Yeah, I just got a new one, and this one actually comes with instructions. You know, just like sometimes you don't really have like things on your mind that upset you or even like evoke emotion or anything like that, but this can like tell you like, you know, to write about your day, to write about what happened, like who you met, encounters and stuff like that. So definitely gonna be using that one. But
Yeah, and here's mine's. This one's a digital detox journal. This one has little statements in it. So the last time I wrote in this one was a while back ago. I can see Jack's name in here. I
And
was writing about Jack.
If you're more like me and you like lose stuff a lot, they have like some pretty good apps actually online. You've probably seen ads for them if you have social media, but it's like, you know, they're cool journaling apps, and it's like this, and you can print out your actual like what you wrote. But sometimes people just prefer to have the actual physical journal,
Yeah.
which makes sense. Also, there's something about doing it in an actual paper journal that's a little bit better than on your phone. Because on your phone, you're still like connected. You can get notifications during your writing, which sometimes can interrupt your thought process. Sometimes it's better just to be on paper.
Well, and the other thing too, if you're like me, I like to take a bath. So if you drop your journal in the bathtub, it's very recoverable if it's paper. If it's your phone, it's not so much.
Yeah.
This one has also prompts in here. So if you're like, I don't even know how to begin or what to say, you can always like start with a poem and reflect on it. You can just be outside. Sometimes you have to like just be quiet and still.
Journals also don't have to be daily too. They can be, you know, do them when you feel like it. You know, keep the habit, but you don't have to. It's not like you should be forced to do it. You should enjoy it. It's not supposed to be something that you like dread doing.
This one I found has like little quotes. This one's one from Rumi, and it states, "If you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished?" That's pretty interesting. So those are kind of like writing prompts and things about how do you polish your mirror, you know, kind of getting, you know, those things that irritate you and agitate you. And they're just prompts to allow you to go inward. And when you write, there's something about, I agree with you, Jack, typing it in, I mean, you can still get the same result, but the touching of the paper and the writing of the pen, there's just something very satisfying about scribbling the words down. And I don't think neatness is really important, or spelling, because it's really not for anyone else to read but you.
And sometimes you don't even go back and read it. Sometimes you just write it just to get it out. And sometimes you won't even want to look back at it. You don't have to. It's just good to get it out.
It's just good to get it out. Yeah. And I think in that process, if you start with intention and you start with connection with yourself and with God, you know, in there, you want to recognize that you're honoring your soul. This journal only serves the purpose for you and speaking to yourself. And when you really go inward and you speak to yourself, you're connecting yourself back to God and back to the Creator who created you. And creativity, right? Words are creative. Writing things out are creative. It's all just, it's another way to stay connected to yourself in a time where we all feel so disconnected with each other and even with ourselves at this point. So I encourage you to go a little crazy, shop for some journals, get a few of them, try the ones with words in them, try the lines so you can really like,
Try blank ones.
Try blank ones.
Try some doodling, and you know, it all comes out with the same end product, which is just getting stuff out, and it's like a mental detox.
It really is a mental detox.
And with that, we just about wrap it up. Oh my God.
I know, isn't this cute,
Dude,
Daniel? I don't know how old you were, but this is like pictures of our family and some words in here which are very private. But these are just some things that he worked out as like a young dude. And, you know, so we've been doing this a very long time. And this book is pretty full of pictures.
75% of it.
Yeah. And it's really just a really cool practice. I think that was the word you used, Jack.
Yeah.
It's not about like you get something in the end that you
Oh,
love.
it's a good
and
habit.
treasure.
It's a good habit.
But
And
you're
practice.
going to get rid of it. You're going to burn it up. Or you're going to throw it out. It's not meant to be read. It's not meant to be published. It's meant to really nourish the soul, connect yourself to you, invite God into your world in a habit where you really get to work things out. And if you start with that intention, I promise you God shows up every night on those pages with you.
And that's where we just about wrap up.
And that's where we're wrapping up. Jack says I can't go on too long. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining us at the Bayless house in Sandy Springs, and the cicadas and the dog and all that. So have a great camp week. Y'all take care. Bye.
Bye.